Welcome, folks. I'm Sam Faddis, and this is Ground Truth, where we try to get past the hype and the spin and the nonsense that passes for news these days and talk about reality for a little while. Today, we're talking about Trump, Mueller, and what the heck just happened. If you're like most people, you probably never want to hear the words Trump, Russia, and collusion together in a sentence ever again. After 2.5 years of this nonsense, and a report that tells us that there was never any basis for it. In the beginning, you just want to move on and get back to your life. And unfortunately, as much as I am in that camp myself, we can't do that because we desperately, as a nation, as a republic, as a country, need an answer to this question. What the heck just happened? How is it that we spent 2.5 years investigating these allegations and then discover that there was never any basis to them in the first place? There are really two possibilities. The first, which would be the good news, would be that we have some overzealous, very partisan senior officials in the US government with ties to Hillary Clinton's campaign, or at least sympathetic to that campaign, who grabbed a hold of information, spurious, poorly sourced information regarding Trump and Russia, blew it all out of proportion, launched an investigation that never should have been launched, and set us off on this course. That we would have senior officials who are supposed to be apolitical acting that way would be very disturbing. But like I said, that would be the good news. Because the bad news may be that, in fact, what we have seen, is a conspiracy, a deliberate attempt, an orchestrated effort to destabilize, delegitimize, and ultimately bring down the presidency of Donald Trump. Now, let me be clear. Based on the publicly available information, I don't think that's a conclusion we can reach yet. I do think that there are any number of things which suggest that we need to find out whether that is the case. First, of course, is the situation with Mr. Papadopoulos, a junior official in the Trump campaign who had a whole series of encounters with disparate individuals, all of whom seemed to be very eager to talk to him about the possibility of the Trump campaign talking to the Russians about information stolen from Hillary Clinton's campaign. Now, maybe that's coincidence. It smells a lot like what we would call in the intelligence business a dangle. That is, that a number of individuals, directed by somebody at the center of this thing, bumped Mr. Papadopoulos and dangled in front of him information in the hope that he and the Trump campaign would jump at the information, do something untoward, do something illegal. In other words, that he and the Trump campaign would be compromised as a result of this effort. That is exactly what Mr. Papadopoulos, by the way, says he believes was done to him. But there are lots of other things here that we really need answers regarding. So we have Mr. Brennan, the former head of the Central Intelligence Agency, who has testified to Congress that he set up what he called a counterintelligence working group, in layman's terms, a task force at CIA headquarters to investigate the Trump-Russia collusion allegation. Now, we have the head of the CIA taking what I think is probably the completely unprecedented step of launching an investigation, creating a task force directed against a man who was the president-elect at some point. Prior to that was the Republican nominee. In other words, jumping immediately, directly into the fray, taking sides in a partisan political effort, and not in an effort to protect the Trump campaign, but based on the allegation that the Trump campaign was in collusion with the Russians. Now, you have to imagine that if you're the head of the CIA and you're going to make a decision to launch an intelligence law enforcement investigation of the guy who's going to be president of the United States, that the bar must be very high. You must have a mountain of evidence. This is the last thing anybody in the intelligence community typically wants to do. Get dragged into the middle of a partisan political debate contest, not to mention undertake an investigation of the guy who's going to be your boss. So you would have to have just unbelievably substantial information to justify that step. And yet 2.5 years later, the Mueller report tells us there's no there. So there's a very important question here for Mr. Brennan. What did he know and when did he know it? How did he justify this step? If this was not in fact part of a conspiracy, if this was a legitimate good faith step on his part, then where is that information? Because there must be something that would justify this incredible, unprecedented step. But let's talk about another aspect of the CIA working group for a moment. A CIA working group, a task force, is not just simply a mechanism for CIA to pass information to FBI. Everybody in the intelligence community passes information to everybody else every day, just part of normal business. A CIA working group means a task force, a unit to conduct operations to pursue these allegations. So first, who else was on the CIA working group? We know that the Bureau was, we know CIA was. There have been press reports suggesting NSA and Treasury were part of it. Who were all of the members and what did they all do? Because they didn't just pass a piece of information. They must have taken follow-up action because that's the entire point of establishing such a working group. What is the scope of that effort? What did they find? Who did it? And on the subject of who did it, we need to know not just what agencies were involved, but what individuals sat on this CIA working group. Mr. Brennan represented CIA. Certainly the director was not the only member of CIA who would have been represented on this group. Certainly there would have been other individuals. And I'm talking not so much about working level folks who would have been assigned and done their jobs, but what other senior officials were part of this group, were part of this effort. And maybe ultimately the single most important question, where are they all now? We talk a lot about Brennan and Strzok and Comey, lots of individuals who are no longer in the US government, no longer in senior positions. But until we know who was on this CIA working group, we don't actually know that everybody is out of the government. How many of them are still in senior positions? In other words, ultimately, we need an answer to this question, not just what the heck just happened, but is it over? Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time on Ground Truth.